The Fed has lowered interest rates twice this year, and everyone's holding their breath waiting for a third rate cut in December. However, what you need to know is that when the Fed has lowered the interest rate, mortgage rates have actually increased. That's right. The Fed lowers the rates and mortgage rates have increased. I've got two great examples for you. On September 16th, the average for a 30-year fix had dropped down to 6.13%. On September 17th, the Fed met and cut the rates. On September 18th, mortgage rates went back up to 6.37%. And this happened again in October. On October 28th, mortgage rates had fallen back down to 6.13%. The Fed met on October 29th and they cut rates. But on October 30th, mortgage rates went back up to 6.33%. So if you are waiting on the Fed to cut rates, stop. That is not impacting your mortgage rate. But we're going to dive into all of this in this month's market update, as well as this new idea of a 50-year mortgage. We're going to talk about affordability and some other creative financing options to help you navigate the Tampa Bay real estate market and protect your equity. Let's get started by understanding why mortgage rates went up after the Fed decreased the interest rates. My name is Rachel Sartain Tenpenny. I'm the broker owner of the Tenpenny Collection, and I've been trying to figure out this inverse yield of the 10-year Treasury bond mumbo jumbo for some time now, and I finally think I have it. The most important thing to remember is that the Fed cuts short-term interest rates like credit card payments and car loans, but the 30-year fixed mortgage is a long-term rate. These long-term rates are impacted more by big-time investors who purchase the 10-year Treasury bond, not so much Jerome Powell and the Fed. Well, it's kind of impacted by Jay Powell and the Fed. Essentially, it's an emotional read on the announcement that he does. And if the Fed appears confident in the market, then the rates go up. And if the Fed feels uncertain about the market conditions, the rates go down. So if the Fed leaves these big time investors feeling uncertain about the market conditions, what they do is they go out and buy 10-year Treasury bonds. This creates a higher demand on the 10-year Treasury bond, which causes the price of these bonds to go up, and it causes the yield to go down, which makes mortgage rates go down. If the Fed announcement leaves investors feeling confident about the market conditions, they sell their 10-year Treasury bonds and invest money in riskier assets like the stock market. So what this does is it causes the demand to drop for the 10-year Treasury bond, which causes the price to drop. Once the price drops, the yield goes up, and so your mortgage rates go up. I guess what we need are these big time investors to feel uncertain about the market, so they'll buy more Treasury bonds so our mortgage rates can go down. And if you're like me, I'm trying to figure out, who are these big time investors? Well, they're the ones trading billions of dollars per day on the stock market. And they are your insurance companies, pension funds, mutual funds, and ETFs. They're the ones moving the maximum amount of money per day that's causing this fluctuation in our mortgage rates. And speaking of big timers, there's another big timer making the news lately with his creative solution for affordability called the 50-year mortgage. Mr. Bill Pulte is the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency and the grandson of the founder of Pulte Homes Group, one of the largest home builders in the country. In 2024, they built over 31,000 homes with revenues around $18 billion. I share that information because it provides some credentials on who came up with this creative idea. And whether you're for it or against it, let's see how it plays out in real life. Before we jump into that, we need to understand that the interest rate on a 50-year mortgage is expected to be higher than that of a 30-year mortgage. So let's roll back a little bit and just say, okay, a 15-year mortgage has an interest rate on average right now around 5.8%. The 30-year mortgage is 0.5% more, and it's around 6.3% right now. So what many experts are predicting is that if we do a 50-year mortgage, that the interest rate will again be about 0.5% more, around 6.8%. I originally looked at the numbers on the purchase price of $600,000, but since affordability is the issue creating this idea of a 50-year mortgage, I wanted to look at what the payments would be on a median-priced home, which is $420,000 in Tampa Bay. Let's take Scott and Sarah, for example. They are a newlywed couple and they're really excited about buying their first home. So we're going to assume that their first home is going to be the median sales price of $420,000. Well, as most newlywed young couples, they don't have an additional $84,000 just sitting in the bank, which would be their 20% down payment. However, they've been smart and savvy and they have saved up for a 5% down payment. They can still get a mortgage with a 5% down payment, but it's going to come with an additional cost of PMI, which stands for Private Mortgage Insurance. And what this does is it's an insurance that protects the lender in case the borrower defaults. The PMI is based off of a person's credit score. So in this situation, we're saying that Scott and Sarah have a credit score of around 720. Their PMI, or their additional cost on their mortgage, is going to be roughly $200 a month. Now they feel like they've got things pretty much in order and they want to meet with a local lender to determine if they should get a 30-year fixed mortgage at 6.3% or try this new creative 50-year mortgage at 6.8%. The lender ran the numbers and shared with Scott and Sarah that on a 30-year fixed mortgage at 6.3%, their monthly payment would be $2,685. Whereas they could save $280 a month if they went with this 50-year mortgage. That's nearly $3,400 a year, which is very appealing for this young newlywed couple. The lender wanted to make sure that Scott and Sarah understood the full scope of a 50-year mortgage, so he talked to them about their goals and he learned that this was not their forever home. Their intention was to make this their starter home and to sell it in 5 to 7 years. Knowing this, the lender explained to them that in the first several years of your payments that you're primarily paying towards interest and very little is going towards the principal balance. Ultimately, if they were going to hold the home for 30 years, what you need to know is they would be paying $490,000 in interest. So that $420,000 home would actually cost them $910,000 over a 30-year period. If they went with a 50-year mortgage and held the home for the entire time, which is highly unlikely, they would be paying $900,000 in interest payments. So if you add that to the original purchase price, that $420,000 home would cost them $1,375,000. So the lender discussed with them some additional options. Knowing that they were only planning to hold the home for 5 to 7 years, he recommended a 5/1 adjustable rate mortgage, also known as an ARM. Now, for those of us who survived the Great Recession, adjustable rate mortgages might sound like a bad word. These were very popular in the early and mid 2000s, and what they provided was an extremely low interest rate up front that would adjust after a certain time frame. And what ended up happening, or people got these, that low interest rate expired, the mortgage adjusted upwards, and they could no longer afford their home. This was one of the reasons of the Great Recession. But again, it was just one reason. The major cause of the housing market crash in 2007, 8, 9, and beyond wasn't necessarily from adjustable rate mortgages, but from subprime lending. And this was caused by deregulation of the banks. So what is subprime lending? It was when loans were given to people who would not normally qualify because their credit score was so low. Essentially, if you were working in the industry like I was back then, we said anybody who could fog a mirror got a loan. Since ARMs were associated with this subprime lending fiasco, they got a really bad reputation. However, they're a great product if you use them in the right situation. Now let's go back to Scott and Sarah and see if they chose using the adjustable rate mortgage, what their monthly payment would be. Well, first you need to know that the average rate right now on an ARM is around 6%, which is 0.3% lower than that of a 30-year fix. So looking at the numbers, they would actually save about $85 per month using this option versus the 30-year mortgage. However, it's still $200 more per month than the 50-year option. Yet there's one other option that might make a lot of sense, and it's called a rate buy down. Really, a rate buy down is absolutely the best option, but so few people use it because it's kind of hard to understand. So let's unwrap it. First of all, you need to know that national home builders are doing this right now to sell their inventory. So if you see a new construction development offering a 3.99% rate, it's not because they have some special bank they work with. It's because they are buying the rate down. For 1% of the loan value, you can buy your mortgage interest rate down by 0.5%. For 2% of your loan value, you can buy your mortgage interest rate down by a full 1%. Okay, so what does that mean? So if you buy down 2 points, it drops your interest rate by 1%, going from 6.3% to 5.3%. This would drop the monthly payment from $2,685 down to $2,431. This is a $254 per month savings. Okay, so here's how it works. Just remember that each point costs 1% of the loan value and only drops at 0.5%. On a $420,000 home purchase with 5% down, the loan amount is $399,000. So 1% of that is going to be $3,990, which drops your interest rate from 6.3 to 5.8. Now, if you want to buy another point, it's going to cost you another $3,990 to drop it down to 5.3%. And you have two options. You, as the purchaser, can buy your rate down, or you can ask the seller to do it. So here's my little negotiation tip for you. Let's say that you want to buy down the rate by 2 points, which is going to be roughly $8,000. Just add that to the purchase price. So if you're buying the home for $420,000, purchase it for $428,000 so that the seller can buy down the rate for you. Now there is a caveat. It still has to appraise for $428,000. I'm curious, which option do you think Scott and Sarah will choose? The 50-year mortgage, the 5/1 ARM, or the rate buy down? Which option would you choose? Please put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear. Oftentimes when I ask for people to put comments below, I always get a critical skeptic who says, I'm not waiting for interest rates to go down. I'm waiting for home prices to go down. Well, guess what? Home prices have dropped, and year over year in Tampa Bay, they're down 5%. So just keep this in mind. Whether you're waiting for home prices to go down or you're waiting for interest rates to go down or both, you're probably living somewhere with a roof over your head. And if you haven't bought a home, you're renting a home. And right now, the average rent is around $2,000 a month. That's $24,000 a year. So if you're not paying your mortgage, then you're paying your landlord's mortgage. But either way, you're paying a mortgage. If you want to learn more about these options, reach out and I'll connect you with a local lender who can sit down with you and go through your specific numbers. Now, this is a monthly market report, so let's shift gears and talk about what's happening right now in the Tampa Bay real estate market and what's up with this K-shaped economy. We've talked a lot about affordability, but that's the low leg of the K. There is a flip side to that, and that's the wealthy. Those whose stock prices and home values have soared over the last couple of years. When those two groups move in opposite directions, that's what causes this K-shaped economy. So let's just do a quick crash course on the different types of economy, because there's not just K, there's also V, U, and L. So a V-shaped economy is one that drops quickly and picks back up quickly. Whereas in a U-shaped, it drops quickly, lags for a little bit, and then comes back up. And yes, the L-shaped is just a big loser. It drops quickly and stays flat. In this K-shaped economy, higher income earning households thrive and they spend more money, causing that K to grow. Whereas the lower income households pull back on the reins and they're more impacted by the job market, tariffs, and inflation. Let's start with a simple math problem to see how this K-shaped economy is shaping up in Tampa Bay. We've already talked about the median sales price being $420,000. Well, in order for someone to be able to afford that, they need an annual household income of around $100,000. However, the median household income in Tampa Bay is between $70,000 and $75,000. With that income, a person can only afford a home that's $300,000. Right there, you see this K-shaped gap taking form. The gap between prices and income is a major part that's impacting the K-shaped economy. But here's the twist. 2025 is looking a little bit different. So far this year, there have been 2,300 luxury home sales, and these are homes that sell above $1 million. If we annualize this out, it's going to come out around 2,600 homes. That is down 15% versus 2024. At the same time, the number of homes that are being financed under $300,000 is actually increasing. So if we go back and look in 2023, there were only about 1,200 homes sold at this price point that were financed. In 2024, that increased to 1,300 homes. And so far this year, there have already been over 1,500 homes in that $300,000 price point that have sold. The story here in Tampa Bay is a little bit different. The luxury segment is cooling while the lower tier is finally gaining some traction. If we look at those previous years, we will see that the luxury home market surged while that lower income and first-time homebuyer market, they were squeezed. Going back to 2023, there were 2,900 luxury home sales that year, whereas there were only 1,200 homes that sold at $300,000 or less. Again, we saw this in 2024 with 3,000 luxury homes purchased and only 1,300 in that lower part of the K. If you're reading about this K-shaped economy, you need to understand that that data is old. On average, it says it's 6 to 18 months old, but really it's being pulled from the 2023 and 2024 market. So now we're almost to the end of 2025, and we are seeing the sharpness of the K significantly soften. To see how this K-shape is really softening, I went back to 2020 and broke down the luxury market in different price segments. All of these numbers are in our full market report that can be found on our website. The link is down below in the description. But here are some of the things that really stood out to me. That $2 to $3 million price point, it's down in 2025. It's down 42% compared to 2024. And the $7 to $10 million price point, that's down 52% compared to the previous year. But there is one segment of the luxury market that actually is doing well, and that's the $5 to $7 million price point. This year, 2025, so far, we've sold 48 homes that were between this price point in Tampa Bay, and that number is higher than the previous 4 years. So even in the top portion of the K or the luxury market, some of these segments are slowing while others are gaining traction. But if you own a luxury home and you're thinking about selling, you might think it's a great time because supposedly there's a bunch of New Yorkers heading this way. Mamdani was recently elected the mayor of New York City, and he ran on a platform of rent freezes and hiking the taxes on the rich. Therefore, Floridians think that the wealthy are going to be vacating the city and coming down to Florida, rolling down their windows and throwing out wads of cash to buy luxury homes. If this happens, it will resharpen the luxury market and maybe cause that great divide of the K-shaped economy. However, Mamdani does not take office until January 1st, and it will take at least 6 to 12 months for any of his ideas to become reality. Most of the reports I've read state that an exodus from New York City is probably significantly insignificant, meaning very few people will actually move. However, we won't know until something happens, but my guess is it's going to be somewhere right in the middle. All right, So we talked about a lot of stuff. Now let's get back to you. If you're looking at buying a home or selling a home in Tampa Bay, what do you need to know? Well, first of all, if you're buying a home and you're looking for the perfect home, the inventory is really tight. Last month in October, over 1,000 homes came off the market. And if you throw in condos and townhomes, it was closer to 1,700 homes being delisted. Actually, the inventory is down 15% versus its high back in May. However, most buyers are still hibernating. They're still waiting for the Fed to cut rates again in December, hoping that the mortgage rates will actually drop below 6%. Really, what I'm hearing from both buyers and sellers is that they're waiting for the spring market. Sellers feel like in the spring market that the interest rates will be lower and they'll be able to get a little more traction on prices. But here's what I have to tell you. If you want to buy a home, now really could be a great time. And there's a couple of reasons. Sellers who have been sitting on the market are now more willing to negotiate than ever before because they're just tired of the market. That's why so many homes are coming off. And if you're thinking of selling your home, with the inventory being so low, yours might be the best option for a buyer who's been looking for quite some time. Either way, there are two other benefits. If you're buying a home and you can close by the end of the year, you can file for your homestead exemption. Plus, you get to be home for the holidays. However, we understand that everyone's situation is different. If you wanted to dig into these numbers and look at the full market report, it is on our website and we've put the link down below in the description. We covered a lot of information today and I hope it was beneficial to you. If so, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And the biggest compliment you could give us is to share this video with someone else that you know who would find this information helpful. Thank you so much for tuning in and we look forward to seeing you next month.